Welcome everyone to the Tenement Museum's book talk featuring James and Karla Murray and Matt Kapp tonight. I'm Selena Kelly May, the Associate Retail Director at the Tenement Museum, and I'm glad to be with you all virtually tonight. If you're not familiar with the Tenement Museum, we're a museum that tells the stories of immigrants, migrants, and refugees in the United States, and we're located on New York's Lower East Side. In this unprecedented time, we've been blown away by your viewer support. Even small donations allow us to remain strong and reopen when the circumstances allow. So let me kick off and introduce our guests tonight. James and Karla Murray are New York City photographers. This husband and wife duo have published 2 volumes of their photographic work, Storefront, The Face of Disappearing New York, and Storefront 2, A History Preserved. Both volumes document the changing landscape of New York's street scene and the disappearance of small mom and pop businesses. So happy to have you with us, James and Karla.
Oh, thanks so much. Hi, guys.
Tonight we are also joined by Matt Kapp. Matt is an award-winning filmmaker and producer and the author of the new book, A Century Downtown, A Visual History of Lower Manhattan. The book explores the tumultuous evolution of downtown Manhattan from one of the most densely populated Arab American communities to the current home of big office towers and a bustling mixed-use neighborhood. Tonight, we'll be exploring the history of Lower Manhattan, the changes to the commercial streetscape, and finally, on the impact that those changes just might have on our future communities from this point on. As we get started, if you're watching this event live, you can ask your questions and add comments for us throughout the event by adding them to the chat bar that you see on your screen. We'll have some dedicated time at the end to answer your questions and hope we get to as many of them as we possibly can. On that note, I'd love to kick it off. Matt, A Century Downtown is really a visual time capsule of one of the most iconic neighborhoods of New York and one I happen to live in. Why the focus on downtown Manhattan? What drew you to study this neighborhood so intensely?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the origins of the book. We had done a documentary called 16 Acres, which told the story of the political struggle behind the rebuilding of Ground Zero from basically 9/12 to the opening of the memorial. So it was the battle between the Port Authority and Larry Silverstein and the families and getting the museum done. And when you make these documentaries, it's 90 minutes long. We did years of research, literally, and you end up with all this visual material, of which I'd estimate maybe you use 1/10 of that material. And we had all of these great archival photos. And a lot of the research for the movie, we started at 9/12, but of course the story goes way back, and so we wanted to include that. And we didn't want to do another movie, so we thought, what can we do with all this rich archive of material? How can we present this and sort of provide context for 9/11, for the rebuilding downtown? So we went into the archives and created the book, basically from 1919 to 2019. So that was the origin of the book. And quite a journey it was.
Yeah, of course. We often forget that the original World Trade Center grew out of the wholesale demolition of an entire immigrant community, specifically of Syrian origin. Can you tell us a little bit about that community and what it looked like at the turn of the century, or even before?
Well, yeah, there are actually 2 areas that were raised to make way for the World Trade Center. The first was Radio Row, of course, which was I can talk about that first, I guess, while we're on it. But that was centered on Cortlandt Street, which, if literally right between the twin pools of the memorial, was where Cortlandt is, right in that area. And that was a bustling electronics district, the biggest in the world. There were something like 300 businesses employing 30,000 workers, and a lot of those stores were run by immigrants. And it was a real cacophony there. And you had the Van Cortlandt Street station at the end of it, so it sort of had this enclosed bazaar type feel. And they even it got so noisy because the store owners would blast to try to get customers. They blast music and all sort of things, manner of noise coming out of the thing, that the city actually had to pass an ordinance to limit the noise in that area. So that was one of the neighborhoods. And just south of that on Lower Washington Street was Little Syria. And that began in the late 1800s. And that soon became the biggest Arab American community in the country. And it was called the Mother Colony, and gave birth to all kinds of cultural things. I'm thinking of the Pen League, was a group of Arab American poets that came out of there. There were many newspapers sold down there, Arab newspapers. And the Pen League, in fact, it was so influential that those poets got together down there, and their poetry influenced Arab poetry all over the world. So it was very interesting to see that. And actually, Little Syria, basically, you know, by, I'd say, the early 1940s, a lot of that had migrated to Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. And then the nail in the coffin was when they built the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. So the lower end of Washington, which is sort of the epicenter of Little Syria, had to be raised to make way for the on-ramps for the tunnel. And there are still two buildings that remain down there from the days of Little Syria. And one is was landmarked in 2009, which is the St. George's Syrian Catholic Church, which is 103 Washington. And just north of that in Washington is an address that they're trying to landmark. But they're having trouble. They keep trying. It's an active group down there trying to do that. And that was 105-7 Washington. And that was what was called a community house. And even before Little Syria, that was there as a community house for immigrants that came in. And these community houses were a place to get health care. There were boarding houses. They were really hubs for the community. But it's really fascinating if you're ever down there to walk down and just see that history sort of, you know, squeezed in between that Hilton Hotel I was telling you about earlier, and another vacant lot where there's a huge skyscraper going up. I think that's on hold now, but it's just this little pocket of history down there that's fascinating to walk down and to see.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting knowing that there is a really rich community that existed in this neighborhood, especially as you walk around between those high rises and the museum. You often forget that those little shops really existed on that stretch.
Yeah.
That's a great segue into James and Karla. You guys have been documenting the Lower East Side and the East Village area for over 25 years. Most of that documentation has come in the form of photography and videography. Why is it so important to you guys to document your own community?
Well, for us, like the mom and pop stores, that's what we like to call them, you know, because they're often family owned and often immigrant owned, you know, when they were founded. To us, they're like the backbone of the community. So when we first began to notice they were disappearing, meaning like they were closing, we noticed like that when that little store wasn't there anymore, somehow like the neighborhood didn't look the same anymore. It didn't feel the same anymore. Like we were losing its, you know, uniqueness and flavor. So we started documenting them photographically and also getting oral histories from the owners. Awesome.
And what to you guys makes the mom and pop shops so essential to the community? What is that flavor that they bring to a neighborhood?
Well, I mean, a lot of the times it's like it's a place where you can get a little taste of home. You know, because especially ones that sell like ethnic foods or have clothing and something that reminds people of wherever they came from. And also what's important, usually mom and pop stores, like they employ local people too. So it keeps everything in the community. So to us, like they're everything, you know, they really are. They mean so much to us.
Yeah. And as we're in the middle of this pandemic, you guys have started filming a YouTube series. Can you tell us a little bit about New York lockdown?
Yeah, well, what we've been doing, I mean, our passion has always been documenting these mom and pop stores, but unfortunately, a lot of them had to close, you know, due to the COVID-19 restrictions. So we said, you know what, let's walk around, let's see what's still, you know, open, like what's available and what's closing, try to talk to the owners whenever we could, check in on them, because a lot of times like they've become like our friends, like they're part of our extended family now. I mean, we spent so much time like documenting their stores and interviewing them like, we really became really close with many of them. And sadly, I mean, there's a couple that have closed due to COVID-19 already. I mean, and that breaks our heart. It just really does. I mean, we know that there's a big problem now, I mean, with health and everything else that's been going on in New York, but we just try to, use our energy and passion for, documenting what's important for us. And certainly
it's
also,
hard to see them struggle so much.
exactly.
It really is.
And I mean, the city in general, just because, I mean, nobody likes to walk down a block that doesn't have any vibrant open businesses. I mean, it's not a place that a local wants to see, and it's not even certainly not a place a tourist wants to see either. So, I don't think or know if people realize like how important and essential they are. I mean, not just like the food businesses, which, I mean, in some cases they've been, they've stayed open. Not all of them have. Like sometimes the restaurants, they can't survive without people being there. Some of the places, they're so tiny that like it's more like a meeting place. I guess like an ad hoc community center. Like, the shirt that James is wearing, Hala por favor, it's a B&H Dairy, and that's in the East Village on 2nd Avenue, right by St. Mark's Place. Right. And it's like I think it's the last remaining kosher dairy restaurant in Manhattan. I mean, we know another one in Brooklyn, but the last one certainly in Manhattan, and they struggled. I mean, they weren't open for a while. They just reopened pretty recently, but they're really, really struggling because most of their business was people just coming in and meeting the two owners, which it's really interesting. I mean, it was founded by Jewish immigrants, but now is owned by a husband and wife team, Ola and Fozzie, and Ola's a Polish immigrant, and her husband is from Egypt. So it's like a Muslim Egyptian and a Catholic Polish woman running this Jewish dairy kosher, restaurant. So that, I mean, it's places like that really that are the backbone of the community.
Right.
Have they been able to get assistance from federally or from the state? That's
I mean, they have a
get through this?
GoFundMe page, but other than that, like, it's a big process. Like they make it seem like it's very easy to get like loans and things like that, but it's
what I was asking.
Yeah, it's been very, very difficult. Right. I mean, nobody that we know that we've spoken with and specifically asked about that has gotten a loan. I mean, I don't know if that's changed because like it's not like we're asking them on a daily basis, and those things are like, rolling. Maybe you're waiting for approval and you don't know, and maybe they have heard, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's very difficult for small businesses, especially like a mom and pop place where like really they're the whole show, like they're running it, they're doing this, they're doing that. So like, how do they even have time to, it's not like they have a whole tech team or someone that can do all these applications and spend all this time. I mean, it must be incredibly frustrating, for small business owners for sure.
Right. Definitely. Matt, you've used the term a tectonic shift to describe how greatly Lower Manhattan specifically, has changed over the last century. We know that some of those alterations are due to decisions that developers have made and political choices inside the city. Can you talk a little bit about any of them that have come out of current events that might point to what happens after COVID?
After COVID or after 9/11, the shift? Yeah, there's sort of two.
Yeah, specifically events like 9/11 that are, national events that, really changed what the community was looking to get out of their spaces.
Yeah, well, I mean, before 9/11, downtown, as we all know, after 5 o'clock, it was a ghost town. It cleared out. And it was mostly known as the financial district. I think before 9/11, it was close to 60% was financed down there. But then what happened after 9/11 is the growth of residential, which had sort of started in the 80s with Battery Park City, but that was about it. And I know a writer who lives in Battery Park City. I quote him in the book. He was one of the first people to move down there in the 80s to Gateway Plaza, the first building in Battery Park City. And, Battery Park City was built on the landfill that they cleared out to make the original World Trade Center. But he said he felt like a pioneer down there. There was one supermarket, one wine shop, one deli, and that was it. But then after 9/11, which I think surprised everybody, myself included, is that it became much more residential. And the residential population since 9/11 has tripled, which is amazing. And a lot of those people that live down there work down there too. Almost a third of the people that live down there work down there, and walk to work. So it's in a way become sort of a green neighborhood in that way, a sustainable mixed use neighborhood. Now post-COVID, you wonder, why are they walking to these office towers? They can't go into these office towers that have all just been built. And I wonder every day about the future of commercial office space, and particularly downtown. And I haven't spoken with the Silversteins about, how they're doing with that. I mean, they have long-term leases, a lot of these companies, but it'll be interesting to see how that changes. I've always worked at home, been an independent contractor. I work at home. So nothing changed for me, literally, except I don't go to the gym, 3 times a week. That's it for me. But for people that commute down there, it'll be interesting to see. A lot of the companies, like, for example, Group M and 3 World Trade, they had already they're creating this sort of new, because the millennials, the millennial workforce is what they're all catering to now, looking ahead to the future. And so how they've designed a lot of the Group M space is people don't have workstations where you go, you hang your hat, you have your photos of your family, everything. What the completely floating floor plans, where you come with you have a company issued laptop, and you have lounges around and these long tables. And this is what they started to do at Condé Nast, where I worked as well in One World Trade, so that people are encouraged to move around. And I think in that way, with people, working at home can be tough. So I when I did work at Condé, I had sort of the option to go in or not. And I would sort of half the time go into the office and half the time work at home. And that's a nice option to have if you have meetings or to just get out of the house. And I actually think in certain ways that sort of that office design actually does encourage social distances, the way these people are spread out in these various lounges, that you can achieve that rather than being sort of packed into cubicles right next to each other. So it'll be interesting to see how all that evolves. But I mean, one upside is, we hear all about this, is people not commuting, the health reasons, let alone COVID, but the common cold, the flu. If you've ever ridden the L train at rush hour, as I used, you're going to get whatever anybody has on that train car. I'm sorry, there's no way around it. So it'll be interesting to see. And people, this isn't so much a New York thing, but cities like Dallas or Houston or Atlanta, where people drive in, and the traffic and the pollution, and, we're going to have positive effects. We've already seen this already on the environment. So these things are really be interesting to watch as we move forward.
Right. Yeah, I'm interested specifically in the fact that you said after 9/11, there was kind of a push to add residential and more like small business in this area. James and Karla, obviously, you've been taking photos of businesses that have already announced closures, like the Paris Cafe and Gem Spa. What would you communicate to New Yorkers about how to support some of those local businesses that are on their blocks or in their neighborhoods that they do love?
Well, certainly the key to saving a business is to shop there. I mean, there's no, they need the customers. I mean, whether
Now
it's
more than ever.
Right, now more than ever, whether if you're more comfortable with shopping online, then shop online. But that's the key. They need the customers. It doesn't matter whether they own the building or don't own the building. But in all honesty, when they don't own the building, that's usually the death knell of the business. I mean, this is coming from the owners themselves. So certainly they need the business. And I mean, I know we live in the East Village, where we live, an unusual building because it's a tall building. It's 18 stories. And I would say 75% of our building is gone. I don't know where they all went, but they're not in our building. We've been here the whole time. And that's a problem too, because the businesses that you want to shop local, but where we are certainly, but I mean, the people that are here, how can they support a small local business? But you can buy a gift card. There's creative ways. A lot of these small businesses, they've had to adapt. They're selling gift cards, or they're selling, something where when you come back into town, then you can use it, but you can, help them now. I mean, certainly now more than ever. I mean, we're giving a free workshop where we're going to be teaching people how we, not how to photograph, but use our collective knowledge of almost really 30 years now of photographing these places, interviewing the owners. So how to support these small businesses and help save them. And, certainly anyone that wants to join our free workshop, they can look on our Instagram. There's a link, and whatever you guys want to do, but it's totally free to help and join. And then we hope to kind of have a whole army of people trying to help, to help support these small local shops, in New York, really, or really any city that they want to. But I mean, we're here in New York, so of course, what's near and dear to our heart is the ones right here in New York City, and that's really any 5 boroughs, really.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same here in Williamsburg with my favorite restaurant shut down recently because they didn't own the building, as you said. The lease runs out, and in a neighborhood like this, that's the end of it. Game over. And they don't have the resources to relocate, and it's so hard to relocate a small business like that. Do you see any small businesses that are able to, when the lease runs out and they move, they're able to relocate and get keep their customer base, or is location really critical to these small businesses where it's so hard they couldn't move location without surviving? That's what happened Radio Row. All those businesses fed off each other. So when they tried to move out individually, that was the end of it for most of them.
Exactly. I mean, certainly relocating is very, very difficult, especially if you want to relocate in the same neighborhood, because really, how are you going to find a lower rent? I mean, maybe a little bit, but all the rents are not that different from storefront to storefront in the same neighborhood. I mean, we just visited a old Italian mozzarella, they make homemade mozzarella and pasta shop in the East Village on East 11th Street. And they don't own their building, and they've been in business since 1908. And people think for sure they own their business. How could they not? They've been there since 1908, but they don't. They rent. And the owner told us that if the landlord ever decides to raise the rent, so something that he can't afford, then he'll close. He'll just close it because he can't move. Because he relies on a business next door, which is the other surviving Italian business, which is Venero's. I'm wearing their shirt. They have kind of like a symbiotic relationship. People go and get pastries at Venero's, and then they'll go next door to get some pasta or some homemade mozzarella for dinner. That's it. You're done. You've got your whole Italian meal right there between the two shops that are right next door to one another. But Venero's, they own their building, so they don't. They don't have that worry on top of them, but they too struggled.
Yeah, he's struggling.
Yeah, we visited them right before before he had to close for a while, because he's tried to stay open with the COVID-19 restrictions, but he has a very large staff, a lot of bakers, and they commute in. They don't live in the East Village, and they just didn't feel comfortable coming in anymore, so he had to close.
And he's we've been through the Great Depression, we've been through World War II.
The Spanish flu,
wow.
1918.
He's we've never seen anything like this. And
it
was sad. He's telling us he's going to go down with the ship. It's all he knows how to do. And you should see him running around with no staff, bringing stuff out to cars to pull up. It's
4th generation owner. I mean, he's been through everything, this neighborhood, and
he's trying to make it work. And it's hard to see. It's hard to see him go through that.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking. I mean, literally when we were filming our YouTube video, that's when he was learning pretty much that he was going to have to, shut the business down, temporarily. They did the same thing. They had some gift cards that they did. So there's creative ways, but I think that's the key, that businesses have to adapt now. They have to find a new way to reach customers. You can't rely on just somebody walking in anymore. That's not
the mac and cheese place by us. They start Sarita's. They started selling take home build it yourself kits.
Right, frozen mac and cheese. So you can it's cheaper to save a little money for people that don't have as much money, to kind of not, get takeaway, and also to feed a larger family. So they were really creative in that respect. And a lot of them also gave to the hospital workers, which was super, super, super nice. They donated, pizzas, our local pizza, East Village Pizza, so many pizzas. We put a call out on social media. Hey, if you want to support me, don't buy a pizza and I'll deliver it, no charge, to the hospital's workers for free. And he did that, but himself, the owner by himself, took his own car, went there, suited up, masked up, and I don't even know how many thousands of pizzas he delivered. And the same thing with Sarita, the mac and cheese. She put a call out on social media. Hey, buy a gift certificate and then donate it back to us. And then with that gift certificate, we'll feed an essential worker. And I think she raised I think she said like $13,000, so that was crucial for her to stay afloat a little bit, to get that extra money, but at the same time help people, the essential workers. So that was really nice.
Yeah, what an incredible story. A lot of the small businesses that you're talking about, I know, especially if they're in food goods, they do have a symbiotic relationship with a lot of local restaurants where they'll supply those restaurants with goods. As you speak with some of these small business owners, are they mentioning whether or not those relationships still exist?
Oh, they're gone. Those relationships are gone. We interviewed the owner of Tompkins Square Bagels, and he said,
"What was a lot of corporate accounts?
A huge amount of corporate accounts, like to do catering." And I think he said it was like 50% of his business. It was like, I forget exactly.
Right off the top.
Right off the top, lost.
And then another 25% with NYU closing.
Right, all because it's in the East Village, and he has 2 locations, but they're with one's on Avenue A and right across from Tompkins Square Park, but the other's on 2nd Avenue. And he had a huge percent of his customers were NYU, New School, Cooper Union students, and they sent them home. They just sent them packing. It's not safe, and they've been home since like early March.
Yeah, he was tearful, telling us how he had to sit his staff down and say either we can all work for minimum wage.
Right, and then he had to cut people too.
He cut the staff, and he
hasn't paid his rent. He told us he hasn't paid his rent in months. And
he teared up telling us how, his staff is like his family to him.
He said business is down 80%, he told us. We're going to put up the video soon. We're still working on it. We have like 3 hours of footage, so we have to
Those
put
are
it
really
up,
compelling.
Yeah, it broke our heart to hear that, because we know that those little shops, and he employs a lot of immigrant workers too, that are making the bagels and doing all the hard work there as well. So it really affects just not only him, it affects a lot of people when they're not doing well. Like you said, it had to lay off people, cut people back. It's been really tough. Yeah, so not having those other accounts or restaurants, like when we went to Russo's, I asked them, hey, I know you guys, you make lots of mozzarella cheese every day. Where does it all go? Because it's certainly not that many people coming into the little tiny shop. And he said, oh, we supply a lot of restaurants. He's like, but that's all gone. He's like, hardly any restaurants are open anymore. And the ones that are, like some pizzerias and things like that, they've cut back so much because they don't have the customers either. So it's like a domino effect, I guess you could say. Yeah. Like that one thing goes down, it affects so many others as well. It's just not something that you think about, as a regular customer, but we hear it from the owners, and it's
tough.
Yeah, it's really tough to hear, and we hope that they're able to come back from this.
Yeah. And it's just frustrating to hear they haven't been able to get a piece of that $2 trillion, a lot of which has gone to bailing out the airline industry. And you wonder why isn't more of this money going to these small mom and pop shops? I'm just shocked to hear they haven't been able to get any kind of substantial assistance to get them through this, even in the form of, bridge loans or whatever it may be. That's tragic and really unfair.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, maybe they've applied and they'll be hearing from something soon. But it's been a while since it's been struggling.
Months. They don't have the cushion to ride out three months. A lot of these businesses.
Right, and we're not really sure when things can reopen, and even especially some of the small little restaurants. Operating at 50% capacity when that finally even comes doable. That's not enough for them to stay.
That's untenable.
They're really going to have to adapt and figure out different ways, because I don't ever see really people packing in to sitting on top of one another. One of our favorite Indian restaurants. Literally you're almost
oh, yeah.
You can hear everybody else's conversation, let alone you can practically share their food because you're sitting so close to them. So
it's true.
Yeah, they've been closed. I don't know. That's Milan restaurant on First Avenue. That's the old Indian
Yeah,
like it was like
the last vestige of Little India.
the little India of the East Village. There's not too many Indian restaurants left, but they haven't been open, you know, ever since this, you know,
Right.
early March.
I was going to ask you about that because I lived on Fifth Street for several years, and
nice.
I would 5 nights a week I would go over to Sixth Street and eat, either sitting down or takeout or whatever it was.
Sure.
So it's I'm sad to hear that so much of it is gone.
Yeah, I mean,
such a vibrant block.
Yeah, there were that not that many open to begin with. I mean, a large number of them had closed. I mean, but yeah, it will. We're hoping. We'll see.
Yeah, I think the next couple of weeks will be telling to see what begins reopening, and what, you know, without us being inside has kind of slipped away, for you guys to unfortunately document. Matt, with the transition that has happened in downtown Manhattan, where there is a resurgence of residences, are there still enough small businesses to sustain this community if there is the loss of these large office spaces?
Yeah, I doubt it. You know, I mean, I can't imagine if there aren't commuters going down there, and there are a lot of small businesses on those side streets, and you know, where you are. You also have the big chains like Italy and you know, over in Brookfield, and those have created some competition. But yeah, I can't imagine how they're going to sustain themselves without that daily influx of commuters from New Jersey, and everyone's coming through the Oculus, and people working in World Trade Center 1, 2, 3. You know, so there's the residential population, which will sustain some of them, but I think they're going to have a tough time.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with James and Karla. My building in Tribeca is very minimally occupied with residents. And I'm also not quite sure where people are, whether or not they've gone, you know, upstate or out to family members in the rest of the country. But they are not here with me.
Well, I think the last statistic I read was 400,000 New Yorkers have left since late March when it hit. That's a big percentage of the population of any city to disappear. And such. Now, whether they'll come back or not, you read these New York Times pieces that so they're all moving out, but it'll be interesting to see. Wow.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
because we have our dog, we know, like, we see people going in and out all the time. So I mean, like, as a dog owner, you're forced to go out. So like we're in and out to walk him, so we know exactly like who's around and who's not, because we would normally see them, and then we ask the super, like, where is everyone?
Yeah, the street's empty.
The streets are empty. I mean, like, we've documented it, we've done YouTube videos. I mean, it's like, I've never ever seen, as a lifelong New Yorker, I've never ever seen it that way. I mean, you know, it's really disturbing, like, you know, in a bad way. I mean, like, we like it not crowded. Sometimes we'd be like, oh yay, like, let's stay around for 4th of July, and that way we can walk around and it'll be fun because there'll hardly be anybody around. But now, like, I don't like it. I don't like walking the dog lead at night. You know, it's it doesn't, no, it's not feeling good at all. Not at all.
right. Yeah, and especially in communities downtown, so much of the business and the traffic is reliant on a tourism industry.
Sure.
You know, this neighborhood would generally be vibrant with tourists coming to the 9/11 museum and the Oculus, some of these higher end stores. And obviously the same in the East Village, going to some of those famous staples that New York loves. You know, you would generally see a lot of tourism here, and we just don't know when that will come back.
Right. And even the Lower East Side, I mean, that's like, we had our ghost town, I like to call it, walks there. I mean, who would ever think? I mean, Chinatown.
Right.
Like,
they think it's like a trick of photography that we're doing, like people that don't live here. They're like,
right.
How did you do this? How absolutely no one in these shots.
Right.
Like,
they're like,
we
oh,
hold
no.
the shot for like 5 minutes.
Right.
Like,
so like video, you can't lie with video. Like a photo, yeah, we can wait around and like wait
Right.
for a car not to be in a shot or crossing the street or something
Right.
like that. But video, when we you see that it's continuously going, like you can see somebody in the distance slowly walking towards you, like that. You can't fake that. You can't do
they
do
can't
a
believe
trick.
it. They're literally
so,
amazed.
I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I hope we never see this ever again. I mean, and it's definitely historic, time.
Yeah. Are you in touch with other videographers or photographers who are doing similar work to you in other cities? Have you gotten any feedback? What other places in the United States look like right now?
I mean, we do. I mean, we have a lot of followers like all around the world. I mean, people in Italy were giving us a lot of updates because we were asking them, we were like, oh, what's going on? And, are you guys okay? And things are slowly reopening there, which is UK. Encouraging. The UK, Australia, we have a lot of followers from Australia, and things are slowly opening there. So, but again, they said there's a lot of stores are remaining closed, even when they are in their reopening, periods. Like people aren't. I mean, and now it's like in Europe too. It's like summer holiday is like July, August is usually when everybody travels and everybody does things. So
away,
we'll be interested to hear from people. But yeah, it's the same problem worldwide, and then of course still the mom and pop shops. I mean, we have a lot of followers that that we know document like the mom and pop stores elsewhere too, and they're all struggling. It's a worldwide,
but the
pandemic.
level shocks people. The level they're seeing in
New York. Yeah, I mean, I think we're
it's really alarming.
I think we're very, very, very hard hit. Unfortunately, I mean, those pockets of Italy too, but I think maybe they're positioned to come back more quickly and better, just because people just always are shopping local and it's a different mindset, than here. And I mean, like you said, the tourist neighborhoods are devastated as well. I mean, who would think that no one would be in Times Square or the Oculus?
Or you can walk the length of Bleecker Street and see like 10 people. That's like you go to McDougal or Bleecker, tour buses, just people just flock in there from everywhere.
Right.
And now you go there and there's like 3-4 people, wandering around the middle of the road. There's no traffic.
I walked up, I literally walked in the center of 42nd Street, for minutes. And the only thing that was coming down it at the time when we were videoing was ambulances and
buses.
And buses. Empty buses.
Yeah.
Of course. So we're getting a few questions coming in, so I'll turn it over to some of our viewer questions. Matt, our viewers are interested in hearing a little bit more from you on how astounding the transition has been over the last 100 years in downtown Manhattan. Where did we start? Where are we now?
Well, yeah, it's quite the transformation. But the book opens in 1919, and Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks are giving a pep rally on Wall Street to promote Liberty bonds to fund the First World War, which is kind of a funny concept to think of now. It's basically a government GoFundMe page for a war. Think about having tried to do that with Iraq or something. So that was sort of kicked off Wall Street. And that was a big thing, because then Wall Street, after World War I, the US took over. Instead of being a debtor nation, we became a creditor nation for the first time. And that's what sort of paved the way for Wall Street to assume the mantle of the capital of the world from London's Square Mile. So that's what sort of led to the growth of Wall Street and downtown, expanding as a financial district. And then, in the middle of the last century, it was in decline again. And you had a young banker of the Standard Oil fortune, David Rockefeller, as a vice president, Chase Manhattan Bank. And he had this vision of remaking downtown as a power center. A lot of the banks had since migrated to Midtown, and he was trying to reinvigorate it. down there. And that's when One Penn Plaza was built and came out of that. And that really sort of triggered a resurgence downtown. And then that grew and grew. Right up until 9/11, still a financial district. With almost 60% of everything happening and clearing out after 5 p.m. at night, and little in the way of residential. So you sort of, when we talk about the tectonic shifts, there's sort of these key events, and David Rockefeller played a huge role. And originally the World Trade Center was actually supposed to be on the east side, where South Street Seaport was. That was the original proposal, and then the backroom deal with the governor of New Jersey, it was moved to make it closer to New Jersey. So, but yeah, then you had Radio Row. We haven't mentioned Washington Market, which was right next to Radio Row, and its various iterations over the years, where you could go get any type of food from anywhere in the world at Washington Market. So between Little Syria, Radio Row, Washington Market, Newspaper Row, which was Park Row, which was right by City Hall. I mean, these things all slowly disappeared. And then 9/11 was this big shift again for going back to a residential community, and that continues to be on the rise. And, a lot of what I've heard, that some of the developers now who have plans for commercial office space in the works, and actually they've already proposed 5 World Trade, which is down at the south end of the site, to be residential now.
Oh, wow.
So it's perhaps to maybe think about these towers that are in the planning stages now becoming residential rather than commercial office space, particularly now post COVID. And I made a joke about One World Trade at one point. No, with Condé Nast, nobody's going in there. That building is essentially empty. And we're in the media business and the writing business. We don't need to be at the office really. For teams of writers and editors and photographers and art directors. It's interesting to see. I made a joke that maybe that could be converted to condos, because someone will pay a premium to like have a condo where Anna Wintour's office once was, to have that be their bedroom. They could sell that as a condo at a premium. So it'll be interesting again to see how all that evolves. But I think that this will accelerate that shift that's already been happening, and that a lot of these big downtown developers are doing towards having more residential. And I think that's probably the way to go now in post-COVID.
Right. And I have another question for you that is a little bit specific, but how did downtown Manhattan rebound from the Great Depression in the 1930s? And the viewer is asking whether or not that rebound is similar to what we might predict could happen now.
Right. Well, I'm not sure how intensely the Great Depression affected downtown. I mean, it was all over the city. So specifically to downtown, I'm not sure what to say about that. But I think overall, obviously, we need public works projects of some kind. And that, I don't know why those discussions for a new Marshall Plan aren't. I mean, why can't we do this? Now is the time. Infrastructure, which is the bane of New York City's existence. And you've heard Cuomo get up there, and I don't know what happened with him proposing this infrastructure project for New York. Why not build that tunnel that we were talking about to connect Jersey? Why not get these bridges fixed up? I mean, put people to work doing this stuff. I mean, and this is, New York's infrastructure, and this has been true, downtown infrastructure was failing back in the early part of the century. We have so much work to do on our roads and infrastructures, and traffic has not been too much of a problem. Although I worry that when businesses start to reopen and people are going back to offices, that people are going to be commuting in Ubers, which is a horrible thought to me. So sometimes I have nightmares of this dystopian cityscape where people are commuting one by one in huge traffic jams in their Ubers, and there's no small mom and pop businesses to buy anything. So it's a city of Dwayne Reeds and Italy's, and everyone's riding around in Ubers. And I'm sorry, but that's not a city I want to live in. So, let's not go. Let's try something else. But infrastructure, the city desperately needs infrastructure upgrades. Why can't we do this, even on a state level, try to get this going, get people to work?
I think some native New Yorkers like Karla and I are seeing for the first time that the subway is closed for one of the first times in 24 hours. So when you think of public works projects, some of it seems possible if we shut things down in small levels or just in tiny little ways.
So I think now is the time to have these big conversations and talk about these big ideas and to try to at least start getting some change underway for these systemic problems that have been going on decades, not only in New York, but everywhere else. I mean, so we'll see. I'm going to try to think optimistically about it. Otherwise, I just spiral into depression. So,
of course. And for James and Karla, somebody says supporting your local business is a great micro idea. Do you have any suggestions for macro ideas to retain immigrant flavor and the mom and pop business's character in your neighborhood?
Well, I mean, I don't really even think of it as a micro idea, really.
Right.
I mean, in the East Village, Lower East Side, like it's always been a melting pot of immigrants, like one ethnicity replacing the other. So,
and we're very lucky here because of small footprints of the.
Right. I don't think that the East Village and Lower East Side are going to be taken over by corporations, like meaning like chain stores just decimating it all, because they would have to buy up many buildings and knock them all down to create these big buildings where like a chain store wants to move into.
So
right. Because they don't want a 300 square foot store. I mean, that's where some of the places, they're that small. They're tiny. They're like, people have closets bigger than this whole entire store. I mean, so, I mean, I see like you can apply like our line of thinking of like supporting your mom and pop. It can be applied anywhere. It can be applied worldwide, to any city, or any even community. I mean, there's like towns in different parts of the country, that when we travel, we can't help but like look at the mom and pop stores and document them. I mean, sometimes we feel like we'll be driving along on a major highway and then we'll like look off in the distance and we'll be like, that we're getting off, like that's gonna have good places, good stuff in our minds. I mean, in Virginia, we found one such place, and it's not too far, like right off of Interstate 95, and it still had lots and lots of mom and pop stores. So we can't.
Yeah, like Karla said, it's not a small idea. It's like if everyone has that mindset to support your neighborhood and support your thing, you start seeing more and more people, and we try to lead by example with that.
Exactly. If you can just start by shopping local and supporting your local store and spreading it,
Get to know them.
Through the power of social media can't be underestimated these days, especially because you can make a change. You think you're just like one person. I mean, like we're just it's a couple. I mean, we don't have like assistants, and we don't have anybody helping us. And really, like our documentation, the mom and pop stores, like we don't make money from that. That's our passion. Like we do that for the love. And I think that shines through. And like if a lot of people did the same thing, I think it could be huge. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like signing up for your class would be remarkably helpful to get started.
Right. I mean, we're more than willing to help people, give them pointers and tips.
Yeah, so many people say it changes their total mindset of what it's like to live in the city, how it's like really their neighborhood is like a little village.
Right.
And they said, geez, once I started noticing these small stores, I started going in, I started talking, I started visiting, and I made friends, and it's a whole different way of living here.
Right. It's just like, and speak to the owner, don't be afraid. I mean, once, it's safe to do so and everything like that. I'm not saying, just barge into places now. No, of course you have to wait for them to be open and everything like that. But I mean, get to know that person, because that's that personal relationship. Like you don't have that in a chain store,
exactly.
Like you never might see that person that rings you up at or makes your coffee. They don't know who you are and they don't care who you are, but the owner does. I mean, they honestly do. I mean, like local mom and pop shop owners, and they'll sign for packages for neighbors and things like that because they're always open. So, people that work, 9 to 5 or whatever their schedule is, they're not home to take a package, but they'll take packages from them. It's like, you'll make a friend.
You're making me really miss the East Village. I'm feeling very nostalgic right now. That was the first neighborhood I lived in the city, and the community of residents and what you're talking about. It's one of the few neighborhoods I think in the city. Williamsburg was like that a little bit 20 years ago because I left East Village and moved into Williamsburg to sort of, you had the Polish neighborhoods and the Italian neighborhoods, and you could have that delivery to the shop. But over the last 10 years, that's just completely gone with all these condos coming in and people coming and going and moving in and out. And it's I really miss that. So I'm feeling very nostalgic. Thank you for taking me down memory lane.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of New Yorkers who are watching and who aren't in the city too are probably itching to get back. Certainly the things that you guys are photographing and taking videos of makes all of us envious for, what New York was just a couple months ago.
We hope they do come back. I mean, we've taken the subway. It's safe. It's clean. Like, it's spotless, to be honest. Like,
the first time ever.
And I was talking about the L train. We took the L train, and not only we took the L train, to Bedford-Stuy, and when we got off, first of all, there was hardly anybody on the train, and we got off, and they were handing out masks and hand sanitizer, like the police were there. So we were so happy to see that. We're like, oh, this is fabulous. And people really are being, really considerate. They're wearing their masks. I mean, most I think we ever had was 6 people in the car with us, which is if you've ever ridden a New York City subway car, that's a small amount. It was very easy to maintain social distancing. I'm not saying that that's going to stay that way. I mean, that was just a few days ago when we took it. So this is already during phase 1 that it was so empty like that. But, I expect that there'll be more people, but people definitely are wearing their masks. So that's really great.
We've had business owners say they worry about their customers. We haven't seen them. We hope, some older folks and stuff like Zaragoza, Mexican deli. He's like, I get to know everybody that comes in here. I know what they're going to eat. They know what day to come. We make a different food every day.
Right.
And he's like, I haven't seen some of my older customers. I'm worried about them.
Yeah,
I'm like, I don't know. Worried. This is my way, running my store is my way to look after my neighbors, to look after some of the people that he's made relationships with.
Exactly. So, so everyone that's a New Yorker that is someplace else now, come back if you can, if you feel it's safe.
The store owners miss you. They do.
While we're on that point, are there any businesses that you personally feel vested in, places that you're hoping will survive this? Anything that you'd love to highlight in your conversations with some of those business owners?
I mean, definitely, like we mentioned before, that B&H Dairy
Venero.
And Venero's Pastisseria on East 11th Street, B&H on 2nd Avenue, right by St. Mark's.
East Village Pizza.
Yeah, Village.
He's taken to live streaming every night in there.
Yeah, so
the owner himself, and he has a great sense of humor, and it's very entertaining. To watch. He's a character, and
and Tompkins Square Bagels, Christopher Puglisi. I mean, he really genuinely cares about his community and his customers, and his business is down. I mean,
Russo's,
really, the list goes on and on. I mean, even Russ and Daughters. I mean, they've been struggling too. They had to let go a lot of their staff.
Katz's.
Katz's.
He stopped in at Katz's, and he
we spoke with the owner of Katz's, Jake Dell, and I mean, people think, okay, well, they own the building. What do they have to worry about? But they have their business was down, and they didn't want to let anybody go. I mean, that they employ a lot of people, a lot of locals. So don't think that just because a business in your mind it was doing well pre-COVID, that is not.
They need you.
Right. They all need you. From the ones that seemed like the most successful, No More Tea Parlor, Wilson Tang, another really great guy, really cares about, his community down in Chinatown. The Chinatown business has really been suffering because there's also, Wilson has
Right.
been telling us, there's been a lot of people that are afraid to go to Chinatown because of, the virus too. And, he's been
Yeah.
struggling. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Two Bridges Diner.
Right. Yeah. Two Bridges Diner. That's like, there was a former little beautiful
Cup and saucer.
Right, Cup and Saucer, which we had highlighted. They were forced to close because of a huge rent increase. They came back, but they rely a lot on the schools, because the school's been closed. Like even summer school, kids go to summer school. Like there would be, things going on now. It doesn't matter. I mean, I guess right now, maybe there would be like school season would be closing, and then summer school would start in July. But still,
there'd be a line down the block at lunchtime.
Yeah,
and that's.
I mean, we stopped by
That's
there,
gone.
and nobody. I mean, like I don't even know how he is
Yeah.
staying open, because he hardly does any delivery.
That's
I
on
mean,
Canal
yeah, that's on Canal Street. Really,
by Eldridge.
right.
Eldridge.
By Eldridge Street. That's another great business, and serves also Greek in regular diner, American diner food, but also
Right.
he's
Friends that own
he's
tattoo
Greek
parlors, they're suffering.
yeah. I mean,
How about
they're,
bars? Have a lot of bars closed as well? A lot of bars, of course.
Yes, I mean the
Beauty
bars.
bar. Yep.
Right. We're friends with the head bartender at Beauty Bar in our neighborhood in the East Village. I mean, that's been tough. A couple of them have opened now again. McSorley's, another business that
Warhorse.
oh my God, they've been in business.
There's
since,
relics from World War II hanging from the ceiling.
Right, even older
Mhm.
than that. The pop belly stove and the sawdust on the floor. They were forced to close. Like
Now
and
they have a table set up in the doorway.
right, so they're serving again to go, but I mean, McSorley's is always about the experience of sitting there and like, hey, you can warm yourself in the cold weather by that same potbelly stove that
No better
like
place afternoon
Mark
in the
Twain
winter.
was there. I mean, like it's just these historic places, like adapting to like the takeout model is difficult, But they reopened. I mean, they're lucky enough, that family, the Marr family, Teresa Marr, it was her father, rest in peace, passed away last year. But she and her husband are running it, and they're doing their best. I mean, it's been a struggle. So many, like you said, it's that domino effect, like we were talking about.
Right. Well, I think as we near 8 o'clock, I want to wrap up our conversation. I think that you have given us a lot of things to look forward to as some of these phases reopen some of these businesses, and we're hopeful that a lot of them do get to reopen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Matt, James, and Karla.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We really, it was great.
Really great.
Yeah.
Your insight into the changing cityscape of downtown Manhattan, the East Village, the Lower East Side has given New Yorkers a lot to think about in terms of putting their money where their mouth is and supporting some of these small local businesses, and about when they'll get back to work, and how.
The New Yorkers are a creative and a resourceful bunch. So if anybody can do it, I feel like these shops in New York can do it. So I'm trying to be optimistic, and this conversation was uplifting, actually.
Of course. For this talk, the museum is going to be fulfilling orders for both Matt Kapp's Century Downtown and Karla and James's Storefront, The Face of Disappearing New York. Since Matt and Karla live so close by, they've actually offered to inscribe anything into their copies of the books. So if you're interested, just make sure you point that out in purchasing. You'll find links to both of those books in our chat on YouTube. We ask you to stay tuned for future Tenement Museum virtual events by signing up for our newsletter on tenement.org. And we hope you'll join us again. Take care, all of you, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.